Well, hello and welcome back to another episode of Proven and Pursuing. I am so excited to be able to continue this series with pastors and evangelists and missionaries that have been traveling or that have been ministry for many years. And today I have a very special guest. Not only is he my pastor, but he's also my father-in-law. And so, Pastor Seydlitz, thank you for being with me today. And I'm just excited to have you on this podcast. I'm hoping to have you on a little bit more since you are my pastor and I am serving under you right now. But as an introductory to our podcast and to you as a guest, let the viewers know a little bit about yourself and where you grew up and your salvation testimony, as well as how God brought you here to South Carolina, because you are not from South Carolina.
I am not from South Carolina.
Complete opposite.
No.
So you can go ahead and just let them know again where you're from, salvation testimony, and then how God brought you here.
Sure. I grew up in the Chicago area. We lived in Burbank when I was youngest, when I was just born there. Burbank borders the city of Chicago. And we were living across the street from the First Baptist Church. And here in South Carolina, that would mean that it's a Southern Baptist Church. But in Chicago area, where I was from, that's an Independent Baptist Church there. And when I was born, the pastor of that church, First Baptist Church, heard that I was born and decided to come over and pay a visit to my parents. And he did, and they were encouraged at the things that the pastor said, and so they started going to church at First Baptist Church there in Burbank, Illinois. And so from my earliest memories, that's where I was going to church. That was my church, and that I was going to. And as a kid, I was in Sunday school. My dad drove the bus. So I was on the bus ministry and just going and singing the songs and trying to help contribute there for the bus. My parents got divorced when I was about, they got divorced twice, to be honest with you. They got divorced once when I was about 2, and then they got divorced again when I was about 4 or 5 years old. And but after that, my dad got me on the weekends and continued to take me to church, and he was continuing to drive the bus and be able to help out in ways that he could. But when I was about 8 years old, I realized that I wasn't saved. I was in a Sunday night church service, and I don't know that we generally went on Sunday nights. I don't think that we did. But there was a Sunday night service there, and the pastor was preaching, and to be honest, Jason, I don't have a clue what he was preaching about. I couldn't tell you this to save my life. But he asked at the end of the service if somebody needs to be saved, if somebody needs to know that they're on their way to heaven. They don't know right now, and he asked people to come forward. And first he asked for a raise of hands, and so I raised my hand, and I said, well, that's good enough. That's going to take care of things. And but then he said after that, if you raised your hand, could you come forward? And I said, no, I'm not going to go forward. If I go forward, then people will think I'm not saved. And I wasn't safe, but I didn't want people to think that. And my dad must have been peeking or something, but my dad says, hey, John, you want me to go forward with you? And I said, sure, Dad, would you do that? And so we went forward. One of the deacons of the church took me downstairs into the basement, and he showed me the Romans Road, verses certainly that I was familiar with, but I'd never put it together that I needed to put my own personal trust and belief in Jesus Christ. And there I put my trust on what Jesus did for me on the cross of Calvary as my way of salvation. And so that happened at 8 years old, and I struggled a little bit with assurance of salvation. I went to Christian school through 6th grade, and I can remember as either a 5th grader or 6th grader there that the principal took me once after a chapel message, and I was struggling with, am I saved that way? And the principal took me to his office, and we sat down there in the principal's office, and he just told me, or he asked me, how does a person get saved? And I told him that we needed to believe on Jesus Christ. And he said, well, have you done that? And I said, yes, I have. And he says, well, then why would you think you're not saved? The promise of God is that if you believe on his Son, that he'll give you eternal life. And he says, if you haven't believed, let's just settle that right now. Let's just know for sure that you're going to heaven right now. You're trusting Christ. And so I said, okay, fine, and I prayed with him and things, but I look at that as a mark of my assurance, that I'm coming to know for sure that I'm saved. I believe I was saved when I was 8 years old in the basement of that church, but when I was about 12 years old, it got settled, and I haven't questioned my salvation really since that time, since about 12 years of age. And after sixth grade, I went to public school, and I faced all the pressures of public school and everything. And my mom moved away about that time. She moved to Iowa to marry another man, and so I was kind of with my dad at that point, and continued to go to church. But something happened with my dad and my stepmom, and I don't know what happened with church and things, but they stopped going to church. But about that time, I was 16, and I just kept going to church. I just kept going. I said, "Well, church is important. I'm going to keep going, even if you guys aren't going." And so I continued to go to church there. Loved camp. I was looking forward to that. I was involved in the youth group, doing everything I could in the youth group there. And then the Lord just laid on my heart to go to a Bible college. And I say I wasn't really planning to go to college at all, but my dad said after I graduated high school, "John, you're going to college." And I said, "Dad, I don't want to go to college. I hated school. I mean, I didn't want anything to do with school." And he said, "No, you don't have a choice. You're going to college." And so I said, "If I'm going to go to college, I have to go to a Bible college." My church had taught me that, so I have to go to a Bible college. And so I only knew of a couple Bible colleges. One was Hiles-Anderson up in Indiana. To me, that was too close to home. If I'm going to go, I need to go away. I knew of Bob Jones, but for some reason I just didn't. I have a good piece about Bob Jones, and so I ended up going to Pensacola Christian College. And there, when I went to college, just my eyes began to open at the truths of the Word of God. I really appreciate my pastor and all that he did for me, but he wasn't really a great Bible teacher. And so when I went into classes that way in college, they just opened my eyes, and I just started learning truths and soaking it up, and the Lord just really worked in my heart and my life. Eventually, I graduated from there, and my pastor wrote me a big long letter saying, "I'd like you to come and think about serving here at our church." And so I ended up doing that, graduated with an accounting degree. I wasn't planning to go into ministry, but Lord kind of directed me that way through my pastor. And so I worked there for 2.5 years. During that time, got married to Rachel, my lovely wife, and ended up going back to college to get a Bible degree. I figured if I was going to make a career out of ministry, that I should get some more Bible training. And so I went back, got a master's degree in Bible exposition, and then graduated in 2000 and came here from there. About that time, Rachel's father was looking for an assistant to come on staff, and I was just finishing, and so it happened to be a good working out of things. And so I came here in February of 2000 and been here ever since. So that's how I got here.
And one thing I love about your testimony is, you would have been in a position to quit. I mean, you came from a broken home. Statistically, a lot of times people don't make it out of those situations because they let it take over their lives, or they dwell on it, they live on it. And, obviously you didn't allow that, and the Lord used you through it. And even you mentioned when you were 16 and they weren't going to church, you were like, well, I'm going to go to church, and you made it a priority. And so, for people that are out there that come from broken homes, I think that's an encouragement as a testimony to say, hey, your circumstance, that's not the outcome. The Lord can still use anyone.
Right.
And so I appreciate that about your testimony. Not that it was great that it happened, but that you allowed the Lord to use that. And so the interesting thing is you came to work under your father-in-law. And how many years did you work under your father-in-law before you took the pastorate?
So I worked under him for 17 years. and I've done just about everything there is to be doing in ministry. When I first came, I was coming as the assistant, not really to work with teens or anything, just to help out. He was just overloaded with all the things that he had on his plate, and so I was just going to help out wherever I could, however I could. There was another man dealing with the teenagers or teaching them and things, and so I just tried to come alongside and try to be an encouragement to him. And there ended up being some things there that we didn't really know fully about him, but he stepped away from the ministry, and so at that time I stepped in for the teenagers and to be able to help out and be able to speak to the teenagers. And so we had another couple at the church at that time that also came alongside and was helping the teenagers, and so we kind of working together there, and so it just really worked pretty well. We hired another staff member along the way somewhere, and he was helping some with the teens. He, matter of fact, took over the teens, and so I kind of stepped out of that. And I've worked on the bus ministry. I've worked in just wherever's needed, and that's just been my heart. Whatever we need. If you need me to work with teens, I work with teens. I did a young adults class for a little while, so I taught that. I did bus ministry. I've done tons of maintenance around the church. I've set things up, painted walls, mowed the grass. You name it, I've done it around here. And that's just always been my heart. However I can be used to serve. If you need me to preach, I'll preach. If you need me to teach, I'll teach. If you need me to paint walls or clean bathrooms, it doesn't matter. I just wanted to do whatever I could for the Lord. But 17 years is how long I was doing that.
So during any of that time, and we're almost closing this first segment, but for the last, we have about 4 minutes. Was it ever hard in those 17 years to maybe go somewhere else? Was the bigger picture in your mind, this is what it looked like 17 years under this pastor before you came into the pastorate, or were you content with it? And so if there was any hard time during that, you can let us know. But if it was really you were content where you at, then how were you able to stay content during that time when, a lot of guys in ministry look at ministry as stepping stools. They try to take these little steps and try to gain until maybe they become a pastor or they become a missionary or, and so how were you able to be in that for that long?
There was a time, I don't know, maybe 10 years, 12 years into things there, that I started just kind of evaluating and just saying, is it time for me to move into the pastorate? And I talked to Pastor Shepler and about that and kind of that desire in my heart, and and he was open. He says, I'm not going to stop the Lord from leading. If the Lord's leading you another place, then you ought to go. And so I really did some searching and really prayed about it and just asking the Lord, do you want me to go somewhere? If so, just kind of open that door and make it possible. And I explored a couple things, not real seriously, but I just kind of looked at a few different things that were out there. And the more I was looking at it, the more the Lord just didn't give me a peace about it. And I was content, to be honest with you. I was content. I enjoyed coming to work, and no 2 days were the same. Mm-hmm. I might be out doing work outside, or I might be studying, or I might be setting up things inside, or I might be cleaning things, and I enjoyed the fact that nothing was the same. Every day was different, and so that was contenting to me. I mean, I was content with that, but the idea of moving, I was certainly open to if God led that way. He just didn't seem to really lead that way, and so I just kind of stuck around. And then Pastor Shepler came to a point in his life that he just said, you know what, I'm wanting to do some other things. I wanted to be able to travel more, speak out more. He was going to work on a book, and that was kind of on his heart. And he just said, I need to go do things that being the pastor limits me, that I just don't have the time to do that. So he said, I'm ready to step away. And if you're ready, I'll recommend you to the people. And that's what happened. And here I am.
Okay. Well, that concludes our first part of this episode. And again, Pastor, thank you for being with us. please tune in for the next part as well. We'll be talking a little bit about that transition into ministry, and then again, those college years and how crucial that was to developing into where you're at now in your ministry. And so, and any help that came along the way, anything that you might, think about that was a huge help to you in ministry. So again, this is a concluding part of the first part of this episode. Again, thank you for being with us. Please like, subscribe, pass this on to whoever might be a blessing to, and we will see you in the next episode.